One thing that I learned early on in business that I think, 90% of new businesses fail within the first 5 years. And the reason why there's a model for success. There are certain things that the 10% that succeed do that the 90% that fail aren't doing. And it's not rocket science, but we put ourselves on this island by ourselves and we say, I'm tough, I'm smart, I'm going to figure it out. Nobody's going to tell me. And you end up
work hard.
That's right. And you end up in that 90% category.
Welcome back to the What Went Wrong podcast. I am your host, Tabitha Thorell, and today I have an amazing guest for you guys today. His name is Jason Roberts. And let me tell you guys, for starters, he helped build 10 multi-million-dollar companies from scratch. He has spent the last 12 years traveling the country and teaching tens of thousands of people both the mindset and mechanics it takes to do the same thing. I mean, that's amazing. Not only did he do it, but he's teaching tens of thousands of people to do the same thing. Okay. So we all know that these are amazing accolades. I mean, building 10 multi-million dollar companies and then helping other people do the same thing. That is, first of all, incredible. So congratulations on that, Jason. But we all know that you did not start there. And so my audience is just eager to know what went wrong.
It's a good question. And I shared with you a few seconds ago, I have an epic crash story. So hopefully you find value in it. I'll try to share with you guys the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the real journey of what being an entrepreneur really looks like. But I guess I'll kind of rewind it back real quick to say, I don't have this college degree. I didn't have mentors. I grew up in a small farm town called Troy, Missouri. It's about an hour outside of St. Louis. My mom was a nurse. My dad, he left. He bailed on me and my brothers and my mom when I was 11 or 12. And so, my mom is the most beautiful woman on the earth, but I didn't have like entrepreneur role models around me. I didn't have like successful business people. I didn't really have like any real role models of like, I want my life to look like that someday. And so I just want to kind of open with that because I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, he had a silver spoon, he had this. And, we kind of grew up without a whole lot of anything. My mom busted her butt to make sure that we had what we could, go to school and have brand name clothes and try to fit in as much as we could. And I think that's really what kind of spurred my entrepreneurial spirit from a young age was I saw how much my mom struggled. I saw how hard she had to work every single day just so that me and my brothers could have a normal existence. And like, as I got older, there started to be like she didn't cast the guilt, but I started to like feel a guilt of like, this woman is sacrificing every single thing. I mean, she didn't buy herself new clothes. She did nothing for herself, and she did everything for us. And so from a young age, I was always looking at like, what are some things that I can do to make money? What are some things that I can do to, kind of take that burden off of her? Some of those things were good and some of them not so good. But that was kind of what started me down the path of like, there has to be a better way. There has to be a different way. And when I graduated high school, my mom's like, okay, you either need to enroll in college or you need to go get a full-time job, one of the two, but I can't afford a grown-ass man to stay here. So you have to figure that out. And so I enrolled in community college and I got a full-time job. My first real job at 18 was at a collection agency. And I don't know how many of the listeners have worked in that environment, but it's not a super fun experience. You're making 200 to 300 phone calls a day. 90% of them end up with FU or something really abrasively aggressive of, you're calling somebody that hasn't paid their Discover Card bill in 6 months. Surprisingly, they're not like super excited to hear you on the other end of the phone when you answer. There's a lot of good that came from it too, though. Like you get over call reluctance, you get over fear of rejection real quick when you get rejected 200 times a day. Like you ramp that curve up real fast, And the thing about it was like I made $70,000 my first year there. That was 1998, just to date myself a little bit. That was 98, and as an 18-year-old kid, and so without really any guidance, all my buddies are at Mizzou, the college. They're getting a 4-year degree, and they're hoping that when they graduate, they can land a job that pays half of what I was already making. And so, like, without any real guidance or influence, my 18-year-old brain said, 70 grand a year is better than 40 grand a year, and I won't have $150,000 worth of student loan debt. I'm just going to stay here. But at the same time, every day that it was an ocean of cubicles, right? So every day I walked into there, I thought to myself, I don't know why God put me on this earth. Like I didn't know, at 18 what I was supposed to do, but I knew it wasn't that. Like I remember seeing people that were 30 years old and 40 years old and 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old in these cubes, and I thought, oh my God, like this is good money, but there's no way in the world this is my destiny. Like not and no judgment against those people. I just felt like there had to be something better, something more than living 30-40% of my life in a cubicle. And so, things went on, and one of the guys that worked with me who didn't do quite as well as me at the collection agency, he left and he got into the mortgage business. And my boss was really good friends with him. His name was Kevin Boshin. And after about a year, my boss came to me. He's like, "Hey man, you'll never believe this. Kevin Boshin made over $100,000 his first year doing home loans." And I'm like, "No kidding, that was really cool." But it didn't really like register at a high level because that was pretty close to what I was making. And so it wasn't this big, huge thing, but it caught my attention. And about a year after that, my boss came to me again. He's like, "Hey, you want to go to lunch with Kevin this week?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "He's made almost $300,000 so far this year. It was his second year doing loans." So we went to lunch, and I kind of called his bluff, and I was like, "I don't believe, like, I love you, man, but 300 grand in your second year doing this." And he quietly, he's the nicest guy in the world, most humble guy in the world. But I was hammering him, and he opened up his wallet and he pulled out a piece of paper and he threw it across the table, and it was his pay stub. And it was like $286,000. And this was maybe October. And it was in that moment that I thought to myself, helping somebody buy their first house sounds like a lot more fun than calling people on their delinquent Discover card bill. And $286,000 is way better than the 70 or 80 that I'm making. And that was really it. Like that was the defining moment that like spurred my thought down that path. And so when I got back to the office, I called down to the Missouri Division of Finance and I said, "Hey, what does it take to open a mortgage company?" And they said, "We'll send you the application." So they mailed me this application. It was thick, it was a couple hundred pages probably. And after going through it over the course of a couple of weeks, there were two things that I didn't have. One of them was $1 million surety bond, and one of them was 50 grand in cash. And the $1 million surety bond was scarier to me than the 50 grand in cash, even though I didn't have either one of those. But I found out through some phone calls that, a surety bond's pretty easy as long as you have decent credit, which I did. And so then it was the $50,000. And so for the next year, I live like a hermit. All my 20-year-old friends are going out partying. They're going out to bars, living it up, whatever they're doing. And I'm staying home, like saving all my paychecks because like I couldn't do what I wanted to do without meeting that requirement. And on April 15th, 2001, it was like 2 weeks after my 21st birthday. That was my last time I've ever worked for anybody else in my life. And I'd like to say that it was just all smooth sailing, but I remember that first day that I woke up and like I had quit my job and I had bought a condo. I had a house payment. It was a small one, but nevertheless it was big to me. I had a car payment. I had bills. I had all the same thing. And as an 21 at this point, you don't always like plan ahead. And so I wake up that morning, and when I get out of bed, I'm super excited. But by the time I walk to the little spare bedroom, which was my office, I had like this sinking feeling of, oh my God, what did I just do? I have hardly no money. And the crazy part about this is partly me, but partly also being 21 is I sat down in that chair and I thought to myself, I spent the whole first year focused so much on what it took to get the company open. And I spent relatively zero time understanding the business that I just, this sounds crazy. And like, you won't believe this unless you know me, but I didn't know how to completely take a loan application, and I had just opened a mortgage company. Like the primary role of a mortgage company is to take loan apps from people that need to borrow money. And I had never even really gone through a loan application. And so I'm freaking out, and my doorbell rings, and it's this guy, Jason Job, who worked with me at the collection agency. And he's like, "Hey man, I want to do this mortgage thing with you too." And I'm like, "Oh my God, no, you don't. Like, why are you here right now? You're supposed to be at work." And he's like, "I quit." And I'm like, "Oh my God, no, you didn't quit." I was like, "Drive there as fast as you can and beg them for your job back." I made a big mistake. This is bad. And by, I don't know, 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there was 9 of us in the spare bedroom of my condo. I didn't recruit any of them. They just showed up and they like believed in a vision that I don't even know that I had. But we did well,
Can I ask you one thing? Can I ask you one thing really quick?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just go work for a mortgage company? What got you, like, what was it in you that was thinking, oh, I want to be a mortgage officer, so I'm going to do all this? Because that's hard. I mean, saving up $50,000 when you're
Yeah,
20 is hard.
hard,
I mean, that is hard to
hard.
do. And you knew nothing about the mortgage business, like you said. So what got you to be like, oh, I want to be the CEO rather than let me go work for this guy that threw me my pay stub?
Probably just being really young and dumb. I mean, I guess no. I think what it was. I think what it probably was for me is I learned a lot at that collection agency I worked. That was one of the. I mean, they had 1,500, 2,000 employees by the time I left. They started at nothing, and I got to be friends with the owner, and I got to see how that business operated. But it wasn't. I mean, most of my income was based on commission, like on the amount of money that I collected from people that owed money. And so it wasn't really hard for me to run the math on. I collected $47,000 worth of commissionable debt. Like that was the money that the agency earned, and I got 9,000 of that 47,000 or whatever. And so it was partially that. Now, again, as a young, naive, ignorant kid, like I didn't factor in that this 20,000 square foot building that I'm sitting in probably costs $20,000 a month on a mortgage. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I saw the gap, and I think it was probably more that than anything. Is I thought, why go build the future for the man when I can build my own future? And I really admired the guy John that owned the collection agency. He was the first like real role model that, like I mentioned, I didn't ever had a role model. And so here I saw this guy that whatever 10 years ago was an employee somewhere. And now he had this business, and he was driving a Range Rover, and he had nice shoes, and you know what I mean? Like the whole bit. And I thought, I want to be like him. That was probably the first time in my life, besides watching MTV music videos, that I looked at something and was like, I want to be like that, you know?
You saw that vision.
And so
that
I think
and,
that was,
and I ask this because there are people here that are listening,
spurred me to say,
even
like,
if they're in their,
why go be an employee again? And you know what the other part of it was, Tab, that was, they were like Nazis about being on time. Like it didn't matter how much money you made that company, how long you've been there. You got one time being late. And by late, I mean, if you clocked in at 8:01, you were 50% chance you're fired instantly, no matter how long you've been there. 50% chance you got one more time. I remember I get to work about an hour early because we made bonus money, you know, so I want to collect as much as I possibly could. So I get there an hour early. And one day I was merging onto the highway. It was raining. I had my window cracked just a little bit. And, you know, suit, shirt, tie, the whole bit. And I merged into traffic, and my car spun out. I landed in the ditch. All this mud flew in. I'm covered head to toe, you know, in freaking mud. And I get there and I clock in like 3 minutes late. And within 30 seconds, there's 3 managers. They pull me in this conference room, and they said, what's wrong with you? Do you not know what time? They didn't ask where the mud came from. You know what I mean? What's wrong with you? Right. Why are you late? And I said, well, clearly I got in a car accident. I got my car towed out, and I still was only 3 minutes late. And they said, well, you should have planned enough time in your morning that even if you got in an accident or something were to happen, you were still here on time. Like that was the mindset. And there was a lot of good in that. But I remember thinking, like, this feels like a prison. You know what I mean? Like right. This feels like a prison. Yep. So that I think those things kind of focused me on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I just want to, because I know our listeners, like, there are people here, even if they're in their 30s or 40s, and they might have saw that vision, but they're losing it. It's like, I want them to remember what it feels like for that freedom. Or maybe they do own their own business, but they feel like a prison, right? Because that can happen too.
Absolutely. That's
and
what
so it's
most
like
of the time
remembering. Sometimes I think ignorance is bliss, because you're just going to jump in with both feet and just go for it. So, okay, you're in your apartment, you're in your your condo, and you're in your spare room with these 9 people, not sure what the heck's going to go on.
To paint the picture, my buddy's got a drill, and he's drilling a hole in the exterior wall of my condo, and he's fishing out phone line because, I mean, we have an ironing board with phones on it and this little crappy desk with one computer, and there's 9 of us. And so, like, people are running to Walmart and getting little $10 phones, and we're running phone lines out and probably stealing phone from the neighbor or something. I don't know what happened with those phone lines, but we're calling like friends and family and asking them, you know, if they want to refinance. And none of us had a clue what we were doing. We screwed everything up. but we managed. A good thing for underwriters and processors that saved us. I think all of our friends and family probably hated us at that point because we just screwed everything up. But we managed to close 8 loans our first month, and
Oh,
they
nice.
had a little like mutiny meeting without me, and then they came to me and said, "Look, we'll donate, we'll sacrifice our paycheck from those loans we closed if we can get out of your spare bedroom and get an office, whatever." So we took all the money that we had, which was from those 8 closings. I don't know, maybe it was 20, 30 grand, and we paid for 6 months rent on an office space. We bought desks, we bought computers, and that was kind of the beginning of it. I realized real quick in that though that I don't know if in over my head was the word, but I realized that even at 21 that I didn't know this business, and there had to be somebody out there that was smarter than me that had already done this. And so I went to my first event and I learned from this guy named Greg Frost. He had done like $1 billion worth of home loans. Anybody that's in the mortgage business knew who he was. And that was my first like exposure to a mentor, to a coach, to somebody that was already getting the result that I was trying to get. And so I was so excited because we bought all his courses and trainings and all that. So I brought it back. I copied it for my whole team, and we came to work 30 minutes earlier every day. And we just started to implement everything that guy had done in his business for 40 years. And we started to grow, and we went from 9 people to 20 people, from 20 people to 30 people. We went, from no revenue to 100 grand in a month, and to 200 grand in a month, and 500 grand in a month. And over just within a couple years, we went from the spare bedroom in my condo to almost $20 million a year in annual revenue. We were up to about 100 employees at our peak. We're the number 1 rural housing lender in the state of Missouri for many years. And I did all the things that the super smart lawyers and CPAs tell you to do. You need expenses, you need debt. And so I went and built a big house, and my driveway looked like a new car dealership. And, I'm spending not out of line, but like doing all these things that they told me to do. And for anybody that thinks I'm bragging, I promise you this story is going to crash and burn here in a second. So just hang on, it's coming. But like every day got better, every month got better. But I was a slave to that business. Like I got there at 5:30 in the morning, and I left at 11 o'clock at night, probably 6 or 7 nights a week. I sacrificed, every day I said, I want to go to the gym, I want to exercise, but every day something came up. For anybody that owns a business, you can relate, like there was a closing, there was another appointment, and all the things that were important to me got pushed to the side, including relationships, including like missing my mom's birthday every year because I had to work, like crazy stuff that you prioritize. Missing, I don't have children, but like miss my whole staff, my whole team, everyone worked that way. And we all subscribed to this. If I work really, really hard right now, then someday I can have this great life. That was the train we were on, So, and work ethic is something that was just, I was raised that your job as a man is to work and provide. And I still believe that, but I associated work to like outworking everyone else in the form of hours. You know what I mean? Like first one there, last one to leave. I'm going to outwork any problem that we have. And one day I came to the office. It was the end of 2007. And 5:30, 6 in the morning, I'm there, and I open up my email, and I have 9 do not fund requests from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac saying, do not fund this loan, do not fund this loan, do not fund this loan. And this is after the loan has already closed or is clear to close. It's kind of like in that window. And the only time that you would ever really see that, just for people that don't know, is, if our closing department, they would call the day of closing or the day before closing, and they would call the person's job and just make sure they're still working there, just to verify, verify, because people do crazy stuff. Like they'll quit their job the day before closing and think that nobody notices, but banks pay attention to that. So every once in a while, probably like 1 out of 100 loans, would we get a do not fund request where they did some sort of last minute verification, or they'd pull a soft pull credit report and see that they had just went and bought 2 new cars, and now their debt to income's out of whack, and they no longer qualify for the loan that they were going to get, right? But very rarely did that happen. And I had 9 of them, which made absolutely no sense. And so I call Greg, my mentor. He's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he's like, Jason, I don't know either. Like, if you remember, there was no warning. There was no warning that our entire economy was going to collapse. There was no, hey, by the way, these banks are gaming people and misrepresenting everything that's going on. If you've never watched the movie The Big Short, that's what this was. It was the start of that. And I remember And then the news broke. We had like TVs around the top of the desk, and then the news broke that this bank went under. Lehman Brothers, this bank went under, this bank went under, this bank went under, and this was like happening in real time. And I vividly remember calling this guy who's our first closing of the day. It was on a Friday. It was the first closing of the day, and I had to call him and tell him that his money wasn't going to be there. And so I call him and I say, hey man, I don't know how to tell this to you. I don't even know why, but we're not going to have the money for your closing today. And he says, Jason, what do you mean? I sold my house yesterday. My wife and my 3 kids are sitting in the front cab of this U-Haul truck, which is parked out in front of the title company. We're getting ready to walk inside. What do you mean? And I said, I don't know. What I know is that we can't fund this loan. There's no money to fund the loan. He says, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have a home anymore. I sold it yesterday. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is horrible. And then I knew that we had 8 more closings that day, and I had to call and tell them the same thing. And then I started to think, oh my God, we got 7 more closings on Monday of next week, and 13 on Tuesday, and 8 on Wednesday, right? Like, because when you go to buy a house, you're scheduling that closing 30, 60 days out. So all these people who are already approved for their loan that just were waiting on closing, it was all of them. And it was probably a good week of hell before I realized how this was going to impact me. And how it was going to impact me was that if we can't close any loans, we don't get any revenue. And even worse than that, we were a mortgage banker kind of slash broker. So we funded the loans through our warehouse lines. It's basically like a line of credit. So we had over $100 million worth of equity lines from big banks that we would fund these loans. And then within 5 to 10 days, the banks would then do a second underwrite off, make sure that they were compliant in the way that we brought them to them, and then they would buy those loans from us. That's how we made money as a mortgage bank. They would, they would buy them off of our line. Well, I don't remember what we had, but I mean, we could have easily had $10-15 million worth of loans, maybe more on that line, just in that 5 or 10 day period of time. So not only could we not fund the new loans, but the banks weren't buying the loans that were sitting on our line. They weren't buying them, even though they had already closed. So now not only can we not generate revenue, but now we're paying like crazy high interest on those loans that were on the line. They only ever sat on there for 5 to 10 days, but now no one's buying them. Right. So we went from bringing in millions of dollars a month to losing about $100,000 a month after month after month after month. I remember driving to the office one day, and I parked in front. We had in this 3-story bank building. We had the whole right wing of it. And I remember pulling up, and I left my truck up front, my SUV up front, and I went to the back. And one of the girls on our sales floor yells, "Jason, somebody's stealing your truck!" And I look outside, and I'm like, "Oh my God!" It was the freaking repo man. Nobody was stealing it. The repo man was taking it. I remember it was raining. I go out there with a trash bag. Like it gives me the chills like every time I think about this, but I walk outside and I'm playing like Let's Make a Deal with Repo Man, because my wallet's in there, my cell phone's in there, my laptop's in there, my house keys are in there, like everything that you would have in your car to run inside somewhere. And I'm playing like Let's Make a Deal. Can I get my stuff out of it? And he's, I'm trading him the keys for my personal possessions, and I'm loading all this stuff into a trash bag. And I remember walking in with a trash bag of all my stuff on my shoulders. It's pouring down, raining. And Webster University's on the 3rd. It's just this big building with all glass. And I can see these people like watching this happen. Like, what the hell's going on to him? And I remember like thinking to myself, I'm not one to ever blame God, but I remember thinking like, why is this happening? Like what, I thought I was doing everything right. Like, why is this happening? And to add insult to injury, it was like maybe a couple of weeks after that, we were down to the last bit. I had to decide, do I pay the office rent or do I pay my own mortgage payment? And there was no job that I was going to go get that was going to pay me what the lifestyle that I had created. You know what I mean? So I chose to pay the office rent. And Missouri is a 21-day foreclosure state, meaning that once the bank files for foreclosure, the auction is 21 days later. Some states you can get away with not paying for 2 years before anything happens. Missouri's 21 days. So I went 120 days late on my house. They filed foreclosure instantly, and 21 days later, I'm homeless. I got no car. I got no house. and I was too proud to ask anybody for help. I was the one that everybody had looked up to for all this time. And so I really went from being a multimillionaire to homeless in a 2.5 year period of time. It was end of '07 until October of 2010. And then to make matters worse, Missouri has this thing called the deficiency judgment, meaning that if you owe $2 million on your house and it sells for $1 million at auction, you still owe that other $1 million, even though you're never ever going to get the house back. So now I have a deficiency judgment that I can't pay. This was all at the same time that the government said mortgage companies need to be licensed. It's when NMLS came out. And so now the state of Missouri is saying, Jason, we're going to have to cancel your license because you're delinquent on the loan that you have. So now they won't. Now as if things couldn't get worse, right? Now we can't even legally do business. So I had to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, like all this at the same time. Ended up losing, ended my marriage, even though it wasn't the right thing anyway. But like, I'm just trying to paint the picture of like, financially wrecked, emotionally wrecked, relationship wrecked. Like
your health cannot be good if you said you haven't been working out and taking care of yourself. Stressed.
There was nothing. I mean, there was nothing good going on. That's like I try every day. I woke up and I tried to outwork it. You know what I mean? I tried to run faster than the tornado, and it just was all consuming. I mean that was kind of the breaking point of like, why the heck is this happening? And I'm a super positive guy. Like, I'm trying to find the lesson in everything. And at the time when I was going through it, I'm like, I don't see the lesson here. Like, I don't understand what it is that I'm supposed to learn.
Hey there. Ever wish you could clone yourself to handle all those tedious tasks? Well, meet Scalable, your virtual clone. They're like having a team of techie superheroes rolled into one software. Need a receptionist to handle the calls? Done. Want to build a funnel that actually brings in cash? They've got you. From email campaigns that make your subscribers go, wow, to ads so effective they practically sell themselves. And yes, they even make scheduling meetings a breeze. Say goodbye to juggling multiple tools and hello to simplicity and efficiency. Click the link in the show notes and join Scalable, your all-in-one solution for scaling your business effortlessly. So it's October of 20, you said, till October 2010. What got you out of that? Because I mean, what you said, the story you just stated was a lot of people committed suicide. I mean, there's a lot of financial people that owed money or did this, and especially men, like you said, pride, like I can do it myself, or I want to provide and I didn't, so I'm worthless. Like that identity piece.
100%.
I mean, they either become alcoholics, abusive, suicide, all that stuff. Well, you're obviously not those things. You're here today. So what got you out of it? What you said, you're positive, which is great. But I mean, even the most positive person, when you're drowning, you're drowning.
That's right. I'll tell you exactly what it was. One thing that I learned early on in business that I think, 90% of new businesses fail within the first 5 years. And the reason why there's a model for success. There are certain things that the 10% that succeed do, that the 90% that fail aren't doing. And it's not rocket science, but we put ourselves on this island by ourselves and we say, I'm tough, I'm smart, I'm going to figure it out. Nobody's going to tell me. And you end up
work hard.
That's right. And you end up in that 90% category. I lucked out early and found that mentor, Greg, that had the successful business. And so my neuro association was, I don't have to be the smartest guy. I got to find the smartest guy and I just got to copy him. You know what I mean? Like copy everything that he does. If you want to be a national championship bodybuilder, you can read a bunch of books, you can go to a bunch of seminars, you can do a bunch of things. But at the end of the day, if you find somebody that just won the national championship and you eat what they eat and you drink what they drink and you lift what they lift and you lift how they lift, if you follow their blueprint, you're going to get I know there's genetics and things that play into it, but the point is that you're going to get a very similar result. And so on accident, I taught myself early on that I don't have to know the answers. I just got to find somebody that doesn't. I got to clone what they're doing. And we went from the spare bedroom in my condo to almost $20 million a year in annual revenue inside of a couple years because of that. You know what I mean? So I got lucky with a reference point. And so when I was wiped out and everything was bad, I woke up one morning and I thought, because I was telling myself the story for 2.5. This went on for 2.5 years. I got beat to hell every day for 2.5 years. You know, from '07 when it started, losing 100 grand a month, month after month after month after month. And I woke up one morning and I was like, okay, because I had been telling myself that I lost everything. I lost everything. I lost everything. I woke up one morning. I just had this idea of like, I didn't lose everything. I didn't lose the knowledge that I learned from my 8-9 years in business. I didn't lose the skills. I didn't lose any of it. I just lost material things in finances. I didn't lose any of my ability. And it's crazy as that sounds, like I didn't have that revelation that whole 2.5 years. And so I thought, my first thought was like, okay, what did I do? If I were to narrow down what I did over this period of time to become so successful, how could I narrow it down into a couple things? And the three things that I extracted were, you've got to have a recipe or blueprint. You've got to have, and I don't mean goals. I don't mean I want to create a successful business. I mean a recipe or a blueprint, meaning that if you want to build a house and you get blueprints, it tells you how many nails and how many screws and how many 2x4s and how many shingle, like detailed map, right? So
Yes.
I needed a new recipe or blueprint. Number two thing was that I equated for my success was that I took massive action, like almost blind massive action on it, right? Like I didn't question it. Once I had the blueprint of the guy that was successful, I put my head down and I just execute. And then the third thing was a coach or a mentor, somebody that was already getting the result I was trying to get, which was Greg. Those were like the three main components I extracted out of my business success. And so the first one was recipe or blueprint. And I'm like, we never actually had to close the mortgage company. We made it to the other side of it. But I associated so much pain to that I didn't care how much money it could. And then there was all this new rules and regulation. I just wanted no part of it. I did not have the energy to restart that. And so I was like, I need a new recipe. I need a new blueprint. And I went to this 4-day event from this guy that was teaching real estate investing. You know, you guys have been to this kind of stuff. And what I saw was a blueprint for a business that was working at a high level at the current times we were in. He was teaching pre-foreclosure short sale stuff. This was in October 2010, same month I filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I went to this event, and he was teaching how to take these houses that were going into foreclosure, help the homeowner by stopping the foreclosure sale and getting them out of a deficiency judgment, but us being able to buy it and then resell it for a profit. And he spent 4 days, and I took hundreds of pages of notes. Like I just got a completely new blueprint. And at the end of that event, I said, hey, I want to hire you to coach me on this. I don't have the money right now, but if you can give me 30 days, I'll come up with it. And I don't know why he said yes to that. It was only $5,000 up front, but I didn't have $5,000. I mean, I was broke. The event was free. That's why I was there. But I had a cell phone, and I had internet access. You know what I mean? So I took his model, I took his recipe, I took his blueprint, and we just went to work. You know, that next year we flipped 111 houses. 2011, we flipped 111 houses, and we netted $3.6 million in net profit. And I'm not saying, hey, look at me. What I'm saying is, like, that was my reminder of, you didn't lose everything. Not everything was stripped. Like, this is a duplicatable thing. Like, this is, and I can't tell you, like, I've worked with law firms, I've worked with dental practice, I've worked with doctors, and every like any type of consulting that I do, I go in to help grow and scale a business. They always say to me, Jason, you don't understand. You're not a doctor. You don't. This is a vein clinic. You don't. And I'm like, respectfully, you don't understand. I'm not here to teach you how to be a better doctor. I'm here to teach you how to run a profitable business and get yourself out of it. You know what I mean? Like if you're either working on it or in it. And most of the time for entrepreneurs or for businesses, we open the business because there's some part of that business that we're inherently good at. But what ends up happening is that we assign ourselves to every single job in the whole thing. And now we're spending 10% of our time doing that thing that we're really good at, and 90% of our time doing everything else. And we're wondering why we're drowning. Or if we're not drowning, even if we're financially successful, we're working 70 or 80 hours a week, and we're sacrificing everything that really matters in our lives to get this result. And I'm just here to show people that it doesn't have to be that way, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you would never tell a baseball player you have to play first base, second base, third base. You're the catcher and the pitcher and the outfielder.
Never.
Right? But for whatever reason, when we become an entrepreneur, we think that we can play all the positions. And it's like you said, usually you're really good at one
That's
piece,
right.
and then you end up doing that less and less and less, or you open this business because you want more time freedom, you want to leave a legacy for your family, and then in turn you're spending less time with them, and then not only that, but they resent you, so they want nothing to do with the
That's
business.
exactly
So
right.
the wealth you're building, your kids don't even want, and they resent it and either spend all the money, sell the business. They want nothing to do
That's
with
right.
it. And so, like, I mean, I love that. And it's so funny you said that about when you go into a business and they say, you're not a doctor, you're not this. And you can sense the pride and the defensiveness because they don't know what to do,
Yep.
but they don't, it's their baby. So even when they ask for the consulting or pay for the consulting, they still, it's like, but I don't know, but I don't
There's
want to do this.
there's a Mark Twain quote that says something to the effect of, "It's easier to fool a man than it is to convince a man that he's been fooled." And and and
Oh yeah.
and so the same, exactly what you're saying, the same thing applies. It's like it's easier to, it's harder to convince them that what they believe to be right is not right than it is that, and so you have
Right.
that hurdle to get over of like, look, I know you're a way better doctor than me. We're not arguing that. But you're
Yeah.
working 70 hours a week and you're telling yourself that no one can do this as good as me. So I have to do it. I have to be the one that's doing the surgery. And the reality is that there's probably a pretty good chance that you're not the only one that can do it.
Right. Right. There's other people. I mean, there's always someone who's faster, more talented. I mean, if you're like an elite neurosurgeon, top 1%, okay. But if you're running a practice and you have other dentists in your practice or other doctors or whatever business you're in, and I see it a lot of times in that bricks and mortar, the solopreneur, whatever, the service, the contractor
Yeah.
or this or that, it's hard to trust people.
Super
It
hard.
is because people will let you down.
Yep.
But like what you said with what you do, it's like when you have the right systems and you have the right expectations, you kind of have to take the emotion out of it, and
Exactly right.
that's really hard to do, but you got to do it if you want to grow. Like you said, it's crazy to me that only 10% of businesses win because I feel like entrepreneurs are really the people that are going to change the world,
I do too.
but they have to think of it as a holistic. So, as I'm listening to your story, Jason, first of all, thank you for sharing. I know it's not easy to go where you have failed because, like you said, it's kind of admitting I wasn't right or I did the wrong thing or, I was prideful. It's hard to look at the mirror
Sure.
image. And so, thank you for that. But as I'm listening to your story, I'm a believer. So I think God has this path for us. And as you're telling me your story, and I see this so much in like driven people, because I'm driven too, and I
Yeah.
have to like
I
put
can
the
tell.
brakes on. But you were living this life, yes, financially successful, but you said like my relationships weren't great, my, health wasn't great, all of these things. Our creator wants us to be a whole human.
That's right.
And so sometimes it takes that abrupt, hard stop. Our listeners, if you're going through something that you literally feel like you can't come out of, and you said you even tried to find the lesson, sometimes you're so close to the lesson,
You can't see it.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to take that step back. And now, I mean, you even just told me like you have a girlfriend. I feel like you look fit, like you're healthier, you're joyful. So if it takes that bankruptcy, that kick in the gut, as sucky as that is,
Best thing that ever happened to me.
right. And we can look at that. And so people are going through stuff right now. I always tell my audience, if you're going through the wrong right now, if you're going through that trench and it's hard. I mean, we're not sitting here and saying it's easy. I know even for you to relive that is not easy. Like you said, you could feel that in your gut,
Oh
like your
yeah.
whole physiology is like painful. But if that's what got you where you are now and you love this life, and it's not easy, it's not a cakewalk, but you know what you can do to get out of it. I think that's the lesson. It's like you looked at to say, I didn't lose everything. I have stuff to live for. I have things. There are people, there's a pathway. And that's the whole reason why I do this podcast is to help people see there's always a way. And you are
Right.
equipped and you have the gifts and there are resources out there. that can do that. So tell our audience, like, what do you have coming up? How can they find you? I'll have all your links and stuff in the
Cool.
notes, but if you have something you're passionate or excited about, just share it with the audience.
Man, I got a lot of really cool stuff that I'm excited about. First thing is we created just a Facebook group called Transformation Nation. I think 80% of success in anything is psychological and 20% is mechanics. And
Mhm.
everybody comes to hear the mechanics because they think that's what's going to deliver them to freedom. Everybody has this mindset, like myself included, that once I get to this certain point, then I'll hire somebody so I can back my way out. It's like an if then thing. And the reality of it
Yep.
is, like, what I had to learn is that is totally wrong. That I had a mentor that came to me and he said, Jason, you're nobody special. I know all kinds of guys like you that make millions of dollars and sacrifice everything in their life that truly matters. And he was being an ass. And he was kind of being aggressive and like challenging me. And he's like, I'm not impressed by you at all. And he was like, this is my first interaction with, it was the guy's partner that I hired to teach me the short sale business. And he said, you know what would be really impressive? If you could earn more money, change more lives in 3 or 4 hours a day than you are doing 15 hours a day. Now that would be impressive. And that was the first time in my life ever and it was that bit of advice that I can really attribute me going from solopreneur to entrepreneur. And there's a lot of other things, but it was a different question for my mind. And so my mind started to think, because I like the challenge, right? Like, who's this guy going to
Yep.
tell me I can't do something? So now I'm going to do it just to prove him wrong, right? But
Yep.
it started me down that journey anyway. We created this group called Transformation Nation that we're just pouring value in because I think there's so much to do with mindset, what you focus on, that your patterns of focus, your patterns of physiology, your patterns of language, the meaning that you give the things that you focus on. And so, when I work with whether it's a CEO from a Fortune 1000 company or somebody that's just starting a business, they always want to get into the mechanics of how to make the business work. And one of the first
Yep.
things I need to get into is, like, I can tell you where there's $1 million worth of gold buried under the ground, but if you can't get yourself to get in the car, drive to the store, buy some shovels, go there and dig it up, then it's all kind of for naught, right? And I know it sounds crazy, but it's the same reason why 90% of New Year's resolutions fail by the end of January. Like, it's not because you don't know how to get what you set out to get.
Right.
It's because mindset. And so I know it sounds woo-woo, but it's not. And I've helped a lot of people become millionaires and multimillionaires. I've helped a lot of people transition out of corporate America. I'm not saying, hey, look at me. I'm just saying that there is a predictable system that the 10% that succeed do, that if you replicate
Right.
those things, you can get a similar result. I also, one thing that I wanted to offer to your audience, I have a 16-week business training, mindset training that's expensive. I condensed it down to 3 hours, and I just wanted to give it away as a gift, totally free to your audience. It's normally $1,000 on our website, but if you go to www.ultimatesuccessblueprint.com and you type in Tabitha as a coupon code, it will discount it from $1,000 to free. And you don't have to pay a dime. There's no catch. There's nobody trying to sell you anything. It's my gift to you guys because you shared the story about people wanting to kill themselves. And the first time I ever spoke from stage after I got wiped out, it was a year after I got wiped out, and I made $3.6 million. And I got on stage and I shared the story. There's a gentleman that came up to me and said, I tried to kill myself yesterday, and somebody told me to come to this event. And if it wasn't for your story, if it wasn't for your story, I was done. I was going to try again today to kill myself. And he said, if you can do it, I can do it. You know what I mean? It was just this whole thing.
Yeah.
And that was when I said I knew God didn't put me here to do this. I just got the chills. Like
Yeah.
I knew in that moment, like, this is what I was put here to do. It was crystal clear for me. I have a unique skill and I have a gift to be able to give it to other people. And like, had those things not happened to me, it wouldn't have put me in the place to be able to share that with others. And money's great, but all the money in the world doesn't bring fulfillment. And I know a lot of people that are really, really wealthy that hate themselves and kill. I mean, look at people like Robin Williams. I mean, there's all kinds of brilliant people that had everything they ever set out to get, but they were unfulfilled. They were unhappy on the inside. So if I can give that gift to just one of your listeners, just one person, then that's what I'm here to do.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And that's why we do that. Like, that's why I did this podcast,
Yeah.
because it's like, if one person can hear your story and it can stop them or change their trajectory so their kids, because I always look at the legacy, or even if they're not married or have children, their nieces, their nephews, there's people in their lives
100%.
that the generations behind you,
It's the
right?
whole
Like
butterfly
looking
effect
at
of all this, right?
yeah. And I love what you said, because if you really want to be that 10%, the people that are thriving in their life, you have to do what they do. And they have mentors, they have coaches. People think like, oh, preach into the choir. No, they do things differently. This is what they do. They change here because this is what's
Exactly
going to
right.
get you to move
That's
and
right.
do the thing. And so you can say it's woo woo, oh, manifesting, meditating, blah, blah. Or you can stop, put the pride down and say, but what if I did this? What if I listened to Jason? What if I joined his group? Whatever. Find whoever. If it's not Jason, it's find
Yeah,
somebody.
find whoever. And like I can't tell you how many new entrepreneurs and even beginning entrepreneurs that say, once I start to make some money, once I start to have some success, then I'll find a coach, then I'll find a mentor. The successful ones, I just bought a 94 bed assisted living facility 2 years ago. I know nothing about healthcare. I know nothing about any of that. The very first thing I did before we ever closed on it, before I made a dime of revenue, is I found the guy. He's the #1 Medicare, Medicaid biller in the state of Missouri. And I hired him to tell, what do I not know? What am I missing? What am I not going to see? The crazy part of this is $3,000 a bed is times 94 beds is what that thing was getting when we put it under contract. He taught me one thing that we were able to change that to about $3,900 per bed per month. It was almost $100,000 a month in additional revenue from one hour conversation that I didn't even know was possible. Like that's you would
That's what it
never
takes.
like load your whole family up prior to having iPhones and say, we're going to drive to California from Baltimore. And if we get lost, then we'll go buy a map. Like you would never in a million years do that. But like,
No.
why do it in business? And I'm not saying, find somebody that's getting the result, whatever it is. If you want to improve your marriage, find somebody
Right.
that's got a fantastic marriage and model what the things that they're doing. I mean, it's not, we make it harder than it is.
Right. Especially if your business isn't like a bricks and mortar. If it's an online, then
For
you think,
sure.
oh, I don't need to invest in it. I'm like, do you know the average bricks and mortar business to get it started is $250,000? And you don't want to pay for a $5,000 course that's going to teach you everything.
Right.
When I
Yeah.
first launched my fitness course, I hired someone. I did not make a dime in the beginning, and I had to invest $5,000 of our family money
Yeah.
to get a coach that had done the thing that I wanted to do,
That's
because
right.
I didn't know. The free on YouTube is not going to do it. I'm
That's right.
sorry, people, but it's just not. Okay,
No.
that's a whole other
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
your
You're
time.
awesome.
Thank you, listeners. And remember, if you're in the wrong right now, if you're in the trenches, remember, stay persistent. Listen to the wisdom of these guests on here, because the what went wrong will eventually lead to the what went right if you just keep persisting. If you're listening to this, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, share this with your friends, especially this episode. If you have a friend that you think could really be touched by this, share it with them. Spread the love. Don't keep it for yourself. Be a giver, not a taker. Until next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.